Well, here we have it. Anyone who's been watching and looking beyond what the media spoon feeds you about China, this article is not going to surprise you. Has a goodbye Shanghai. After 16 years, COVID curbs send American family packing. American Heather Kai and her family, including Kat Mucci, are part of a wave of residents departing Shanghai, leaving behind their homes and memories driven out by 2 years of strict COVID-19 curbs, including a crushing 2-month lockdown. Heather and her husband George arrived in Shanghai from New York in 2006 for a 1-year adventure. But 16 years later, their 2-bedroom apartment in Shanghai's historic former French concession is the only home their children have ever known. So while returning to the United States is technically a homecoming for Heather and George, leaving Shanghai means leaving home for daughters Charlotte, 14, and Matilda, 12. Happens all the time, really. People leave where they are. Even within the U.S., if you move from one area to the other, you're going to experience some culture shock a little bit. You go from New York to Kansas, the middle of Kansas, or vice versa. Heck, Guns N' Roses had an entire song about it, Welcome to the Jungle. I mean, it's really nothing new here. But we'll get on to the reasons why here. Heather spent the month of June readying for a return to the United States. Her husband left weeks earlier with their family dog. They don't mention the cat. Dog wasn't named. Poor dog. To help prepare for the new life in Washington, D.C. Of all the places, you go to Washington, D.C. Sorry, that's just not where I would go, but hey, I've had the luxury to really grieve a lot for what I'm leaving behind, because I need to get 2 kids and a cat out of here. So it's been really focused on that logistics, she told Reuters from her flat, which had just been emptied out by movers. The Kay family are part of an exodus of both foreigners and locals from Shanghai, as China's most cosmopolitan city tries to find its footing and return to normal life after a strict city lockdown aimed at stamping out the infectious Omicron variant. And this is something, everybody saw it coming. We had an economic turndown. We're still about to do a recession, hopefully not. Because of all that shutdown here in the U.S. So people have this weird thing that the economy can be flipped on and off like a light switch. Off, on? No, it's not going to work that way. It goes, while some opted to leave in the midst of the lockdown, stunned by difficulties in obtaining food and fears of being separated from family members, should they be infected with COVID, others like the Kays opted to wait it out. They purchased their new house in Washington, D.C. online during the lockdown. And this is one thing that I like how they kind of talked about, kind of glossed over, difficulties in obtaining food, fears of being separated. The media during the lockdown kind of downplayed that. That's not happening. The CCP is telling us that's not happening, so it's not happening. And yet, they just kind of gloss over the fact that it's one of the concerns why people are leaving. For many departing foreign residents, the lockdown was the last straw. After 2 years of strict COVID curbs that made it immensely difficult to fly in and out of China, the country whose zero COVID approach towards the virus, has increasingly made it out of step with the rest of the world, has slashed the quarantine time for inbound travelers from 14 days in a central facility to 7 days. There's half the time now. Its biggest change to its border restrictions put in place in early 2020. According to the European Chamber, the number of foreigners in China has halved since the pandemic began. Really, this is something they wanted. They don't want the foreigners there anymore. That is something, if you watch actual people doing it, not the people parroting the CCP propaganda, this doesn't come as any surprise to you. Again, it predicts the number could halve again this summer, with few international workers coming in to replenish the numbers leaving. Talking to people who were scheduled to move to Shanghai in the summer, they're not. They're not going to Singapore. Well, no, they're going to Singapore. They're going to Bangkok. Being based here, so many people can't really do their jobs anymore because they do require so much travel, and that's made it prohibitive to so many. With aging parents in the U.S., travel restrictions were a big part of Kay and her husband's decision to leave. She said, describing how they already made up their minds before the lockdown. Why did it take you so long? Really? I do wonder now if you had made up your minds before the lockdown. Why did you wait so long during the lockdown before leaving? Kay moved to Shanghai to work for a fashion label and became enthralled by the fast-charging energy of China on the rise. No, I'll admit, back in the early 2000s, I seriously thought about going to China too. No, I did have something with my parents and it didn't work out, but I wanted to. And then by the time I was able to again, 10 years later, there was no way I was going over, and it had changed. Her husband left behind his career as a banker in the United States and quickly immersed himself in Chinese culture and learned to speak Mandarin. He eventually started his own sustainable bamboo toy business. They further cemented their ties to the city by purchasing their apartment, considered an unusual move for foreigners in Shanghai both then and now. Anything you can imagine, you can build it here. Anything you want to be, you can make it happen. Within restrictions, no, the CCP, no, they're still hyping it up, but it's not what it used to be. Since Shanghai eased its lockdown curbs on June 1st, she has busied herself with packing, but also made sure she found time to reminisce over her time in the city with bike rides to the Bund and last plate of dumplings from her favorite local haunt. The safe streets of Shanghai will be particularly missed, she said, recounting how she would walk her dog late at night and felt able to let her children take the subway by themselves when they were as young as 10 years old. The Kay family's last few years in Shanghai have been tinged by China's growing isolation due to COVID border curbs and a worsening relationship between Washington and Beijing. But she said it has not marred their experience. I think the people around the world are basically the same. We all want to be safe, and we want to be able to go to our work and do creative things and get a good education for our kids and have a home and community and shelter. I think on the government level is where things get so misunderstood. 3 days after she and her daughters landed in the United States, all three tested positive for COVID, but they have no regret about their move. I like that last little part. No, now they're COVID. No, they have to add that line. It's one that they kind of glossed over some things that China's been doing. No, the obtaining food and separate the lockdowns to still give that positive China message. Because you can't just hate or not write something bad about China. Despite the fact, now, I'm sorry, the last 5 years or so, China's been going backwards in relation to the world. They haven't been going forward, but yet everybody still thinks this is the China of the early 2000s. It's not. It's time to stop thinking that. This isn't that welcoming China anymore. This is a very restrictive, even heading towards fascist China, if they're not already there. But, let me know what you think. Good, bad, no, did you see this type thing coming? Did you not? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm on YouTube. Come on over to Rumble, and I'll see you next video.